beginning, what then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who is against us? It's a discussion of, turning to those things that are spiritual versus those things that are living according to the flesh. Living according to the flesh, you must die. Verse 7 or 8. So it's also, I think, verse 18 is a good one in context of this conversation about if God is for us, who could be against us. Verse 18 says, I consider the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed to us. With the anxious longing of the creation waits eagerly for the revealing of the sons of God. What shall we say to these things? I know what I say to these things sometimes. I say these things are getting the better of me. I say these things are getting me down. That I'm not dealing well with my emotional state as a result of the world around me. I can't believe I'm the only one that feels that way about that. The world sometimes is just an overwhelmingly dumb, evil place. And if you spend a lot of time worrying about it, it can mess with your mind. The mindset on the flesh is death. I know that's a spiritual reference, but it has application also to the one who is constantly allowing the turmoils of this life to be that which is more important to them than dealing with other matters. And there's the challenge. There's the challenge of those stressors getting away from us, not having the sufficient tools in our toolbox to handle those things that cause us anxiety. Again, this impacts our health in so many ways, in our mental health, our physical health. I did not have a great day today, and it was in large part to my own poor choices that I ended up having not a real productive day. And when I'm engaging in some of these things, I know they're a bad idea, and I do them anyway. And then for the half of the day, I'm going, why did I do that? That was so dumb. It's made me feel weak, made me feel out of control. Yes, Eric.
I know you own it. I made poor choices. You own it. I appreciate that. So what do you got to do? You got to move on. Yeah, you got to compartmentalize it and move on. Make better choices. Compartmentalize it. I know for you it's different because I know on Sunday you said you have to look at some of the political aspects more because of what you do. I turn it off because I can't stand it. It's stressful and I don't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just turn it off. It bothers my energy so bad that I just, nope, turn it off. I'd rather listen to music, do a craft, do something good. I made pancakes this morning. Just do something good for somebody that helps your self-esteem.
I've had people call me because of my office in just a state of panic, and I said, turn off television, stop watching the news, and go clean the leaves out of your neighbor's gutter. Do something. I've given that advice to people. It's just not worth it. And so, for myself, I've been in this role for 19 years now, and I think it's taken its toll. I've shared it with others. I'll share it with you all as well. I'm not running again next year. I'm getting out of it. I've just decided that I have to find more productive things to do with my time. And for all that I could do in that office that are good things, there's still a high price to pay for that. And so I've set aside some of these things and said, I've got to find something else to do with my time and my energies, just as you recommended, Harriet. So maybe I'm going to get better. We'll see. I'm going to work on that. Do you read this with a hope and an assurance that you should? When if God is for us, who can be against us? Can we talk about anything that's really much more powerful than this idea that when we stand in God's corner, He is standing in our corner? I mean, in terms of our ability to deal with the stress of things, whatever that is, nothing resets the mind like saying, but I'm a victor. I win. When I stand in God's corner. Somebody help me out and tell me a good story. Yes, Andrew.
What I hear when I think of this phrase, this question, when God is for us, who can be against us, it's contextualizing is what this statement is doing for me. This thing that I'm stressed about, this thing that I'm anxious over, how important is it? And right away I might say, well, it's really important. You know, I'm worried about work, or I'm worried about my family, or I'm worried about the future and what I'm going to be in the future, or what I'm going to do. And so you start out saying, well, it's important, but then you go, well, okay, what's the worst way it can turn out? And you know, okay, when that happens, what are you going to do then? Well, I know that I'll have these people around me, or I'll have these systems around me. I'll have these things I can do. And when you keep stepping up the ladder of how bad can it be and how important is it really, you get to the question that's asked here in Romans, which is, well, with God, how significant is anything that you can have stress or anxiety over? It doesn't eliminate the feeling, but when you can pause and step up that ladder of significance and get that context, you can, I find you can be calmer about the things that you started out worrying over. And maybe that causes you to start worrying about cosmic matters, but that's in God's hands, not mine. So I would not do well if I chose to worry about that.
So Andrew's kind of applying verses 37 and 38 of Romans 8. In all things we overwhelmingly conquer through Him who loved us. For I'm convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor any created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. I didn't see job listed there. I didn't see, fighting with the neighbors over the fence. I didn't see all kind of things that we could put in there that we might basically trivialize compared to what is on the list of things that cannot separate us from the love of Christ. As Andrew said, now you're maybe on a more of a cosmic level when you make that transition in your mind, but just how bad can these things be? According to the Roman author, it is things of the utmost importance, things of the utmost power, things that are higher than ourselves that are still unable to separate us from the love of Christ. So how bad can the job be? How bad can the line at the grocery store be? How bad can whatever it is? Did I see a hand back? Were you stretching?
I got something.
Please.
I think at my young age,
I'll agree with that.
the biggest thing, as we've been talking, the biggest thing I struggle with mental health is the way I view a lot of things. And looking at verse 31, talking about, who's against us, or, God being with us, it's so easy to think that everyone's against us, or in certain situations that it's everybody else, it's not me, it's everybody's against me. I realized that I struggle with that a lot. And today I was driving through the country roads of wherever I was. And when I drive, I try not to be on my phone, right? I'm just driving and paying attention. And it was just me. There's not a lot of people on the road. The sun, the creation. And what I realized is that the past, like, so much of your life you've been focusing on all the earthly things, all the personal things, all the things that don't matter. And really, the discussion we're having is, and what made me realize this is, we live in a spiritual place that God has built. Now, it is earth and it's separate from heaven, but God, who is spiritual, built this creation for us, physical, to live, for a purpose of living for Him. So why am I all caught up in the things of this life that don't matter? Why am I letting things get me down? Why am I letting the days that I feel unmotivated and when I don't do anything about it, get me down and separate myself from a better mindset? So all that to say is my personal experience, what we've been reading, the realizations I had, seeing the beauty in the creation today of just the sun and the trees and the green. And it really does work when you turn yourself in a mindset of spirituality with God, your relationship with God. That no matter what your age is, no matter what you're going through, we need to stop focusing on the physical things and, oh, this went wrong, or this thing looked at my house is broken and it just ruined my day, or whatever it is. Someone's told me in this room, it's all just stuff and things. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. What
I never
matters
told
is,
you that.
yeah. What matters is where we are in our spiritual life. And I think that's really what we're getting to of this verse in verse 31. Nobody really is, and everybody is against us, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because God is always for us. And that's what that looks like to me. That's what that looks like to me.
You know, we've got to caution ourselves against the world we build inside our minds that's contrary to the world that we can experience under Christ. And we can build all kinds of reservations and obstacles that are only going to be impactful when we've forgotten that we have a divine purpose and a divine destiny. Human nature is to disregard that which has a far, far off expiration date and focus on the things that are more immediate. And so when we are constantly advised and encouraged to consider the eternal, think about how difficult that is. Think about how much of a challenge that really is. Maybe it comes easy to you, but it doesn't come easy to me. And it's important that we are constantly reminded of those things that are important. I'm going to give Samantha a chance. She's got her hand up longer.
Your comment about, thinking about the eternal kind of reminds me of a conversation that happened in one of my psychology classes, and the professor was talking about kind of people who think a lot about dying. And he said, typically somebody's like that either if they've, had some kind of experience or they've watched someone die, or if they have some psychological disorder. And he said, in a way, they might be at an advantage because their thought process is would be thinking more about the eternal when you have that kind of thought process. So I guess what I'm trying to say is even if you're struggling, there could be an upside to that as far as, in a way, you are thinking about the eternal.
Yeah, I think you become a state of morbidity if that's all you focus on is the physical death. But if you, as I think you're suggesting, translate that into more of a long-term view than a short-term view, meaning, there's a U.S. senator that got some real political flack recently talking about Medicaid payments and how people are going to suffer. And, well, people are going to die because of these cuts in Medicaid. And their response was, we're all going to die. And I will say that does sound very insensitive to a room full of people that are looking for medical treatments to be paid for by a federal program. But there is actually some truth to that, and that having a healthy realization of our own mortality, I would argue, is what you're shooting for when you say there can be value in thinking about our death in a real sense, not in a so far in the future sense that it's not relevant to us. Race, you have something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you're not alone with what you were talking about earlier. I mean, because the reality is, I can look at all of this, and if I take a step back from what it is that I'm struggling with, I have no problem recognizing that in the grand scheme of things, it's little. Problem is, from moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day, those little bitty things that really aren't that significant in the grand scheme of things seem ginormous. They're huge. And I don't know how I'm going to get through it. And so that's the struggle. That's the struggle I face. Maybe it's the struggle others face. I don't have a problem with my faith. I'm clear on the fact that there is a God. I'm clear on the fact that Jesus died for me, and that is obvious evidence that God would do anything for me. I am clear on the fact that God has not forsaken me. I am clear on the fact that I am a conqueror through Jesus Christ. Problem is, the conquering and the victory are probably not going to be today. And so as I face the struggles of the day-to-day, those become sometimes overwhelming and distract me from where my focus needs to be. And I lose the clarity of the things that I know to be a fact because of the struggle of the emotions and the feelings that I'm going through in the moment.
And I just, for some reason, thought of the irony of what you just said about the victory doesn't come today, and how Jesus, as he entered Jerusalem, was given a hero's welcome. And he was marched into the city as a conqueror, and then they crucified him a few short days later. Sort of a hollow victory, wasn't it? But it was an earthly victory from the standpoint of those who were offering that kind of accolade and praise of Jesus. They didn't know what they were doing, actually. Yes, Andrew?
Another thing is to be honest with ourselves about what we actually have the ability to control and what we don't. So much of anxiety and stress is wrapped up in stuff that I can't actually change if I wanted to. And so I'm just hurting myself more. A lot of my examples that I can think of that come to mind, they seem to be revolving around work a lot of the time. But, you know, we worry about, well, does this person like me? You know, are we liked by other people? And that's entirely out of our control. You can try to be likable, and you can try to be honest, and you can try to follow through on the things that you say. That's what's in your control, but whether or not someone likes you is not, that's totally out of your control. So we just have to also get better at, I have to get better at differentiating what can I affect and what can I not.
Yeah, going back to 19 years in public office, I gave up on that one a long time ago. I realized that people were not going to like me just for the face of it. But, you know, someone said to me a long time ago, you know, it's only 99% of politicians that give the other 1% a bad name. You know, the local paper headlines have been full of fraud and stealing of over $1 million from a relatively small government office, relatively small agency. And it is very disheartening, and it's demoralizing when you look at the behaviors that, you know, I don't know how many people actually plan to be thieves when they get an opportunity to steal in that manner, but the opportunity's there, and the motivation is to take advantage of that, and I think just gets out of hand, and I can't control any of that. I can't stop other people from defrauding people, unless I'm maybe a police investigator or something. But even then, that's after the fact. I can't stop it. We write laws all the time. People say, we need to write a law to stop this from happening. And I remind people, laws don't stop anything from happening. These create consequences when those things happen. And there's a big difference. And some of those consequences I don't think are necessarily in the mind of the one who's committing the act as a deterrent, like many people think that it is. If you're a law-abiding person by nature, and you choose to be a law-abiding person, that's a deterrent. But if you're one who doesn't consider that the law applies to you, it doesn't matter what the law says. You don't care. And you're going to do what you want to do anyway. I see another hand. Yes, Harriet.
The world is a big place, and it can be so overwhelming. And I tell my patients, why
They say one bite at a
one
time.
bite at a time. You gotta take it a day at a time, a minute at a time, a second at a time. It can be too overwhelming, and I've seen people just, well, they relapse and get on drugs and alcohol, and it's really sad. And when they come in, they'll tell me, "Are you mad at me?" No, I'm not mad at you. You're here. I can help you. If you're dead, I can't help you.
Hmm.
So you're here. We can help you. A minute at a time, a second at a time. It takes time. The world is big. It can be overwhelming. And years ago, I took care of he had been sober for about 40 years, and his wife died, and he relapsed. And I'm like, okay, you're here. And he got back, and he knew what he needed to do. There's some people who don't know what they need to do. That's why, as Christians, we're here to kind of like guide people into thinking about, hey, you're not here forever. We can help you out spiritually. But I know when the world is heavy, it's hard to focus.
Yeah, it's hard to think straight sometimes. And you provided good evidence for appreciating small steps and being willing to take a victory in a small step as opposed to, fixing everything all at one time. And again, we're not necessarily fixing everything. Stress and anxiety are part of daily living, but just learning the tools to manage it better. I wanted to make this point. Well, actually, let's look at Philippians 4 before I do that. Let's go back. Philippians 4. And sort of your classic verses on stress and anxiety. I say classic because I think we generally associate this discussion with dealing with stressors in life. Verse 5 says, "Let your forbearing spirit be known to all men. The Lord is near. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication. With thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, shall guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." We can put some comfort in that peace that is beyond comprehension when our own thinking is not good thinking. And that's, again, going to take some work and going to take some reminders and going to take some effort to make application of something that is simple to read and by its own admission, hard to comprehend. By God's own admission through this letter, this is the peace that passes comprehension. You ever think about that? It is, in one sense, unnatural. Correct? The peace of God is unnatural. Do you understand when I say that, what I mean? It is not from this realm. It is not of nature. It is heavenly. It is spiritual. The peace of God is unnatural. It is not a natural phenomenon. And therefore, when we're in a natural mindset, it is beyond our comprehension. Right? The spiritual minded get it. We don't necessarily understand the mechanism sometimes, but we get it. Is that we can, through prayer and supplication and thanksgiving, lay these things on God, and He can provide where we can't see how to do that. And we do that, again, by working on focusing our minds. These are mind exercises. Here, assigned in verses 8 and 9. Think on the things that are right and that are pure, that are lovely, that are of good repute or good report. Think of things that are of excellence and worthy of praise. And let our minds dwell on these things. and practice the things you've learned and received and heard from me. And the peace of God will be with you. There. We can wrap up the class. It's all done. We can all go home. It's just that simple.
Well, filling our lives with positive things is really important. If it's always negative and the world is negative, turning it off is such a good idea. And just making nice things, doing nice things and thinking nice things. It's not hard to do. It's just turning off the bad stuff.
Yeah. That's in the hand, Andrew.
Yeah, the peace of God surpassing understanding. I think a lot of translations may put that as peace of God passing. Regardless, I think we get tripped up a lot when we stop to try to pursue understanding of everything and look for a reason for everything. And I've got to study this problem and get down to the root of what it is, and once I fully understand it all, then I'll have the tools to make it go away. And the solve resolves a lot faster when you're willing to let some things go, as far as I'm not going to understand this, but I'm just going to give it to God and allow Him to take it away, even if I haven't attained understanding yet. And to maybe, if you're a perfectionist, or if you're always in pursuit of that, I got to know why, I've got to know how it works, I've got to know how to fix it. That can be really hard to do. To adopt some of that innocence, or adopt some of that faith, faith of a child, where you just say, okay, I'll just let this pass, instead of just trying to reason through all of it all the time.
I wish it was just that easy to take all your advice and put it to work.
I mean, I can't.
I know, and I'm up here spouting advice too, and I can't make it work either. Not all the time. I've been painting in Mother's old house. And when I get up on the scaffolding, I've got my head so close to the ceiling, I can't step back to see where I painted. And I'm putting on ceiling light over walls that I primed, or ceilings that I primed. And it's white on white, and I'm just going blind, trying to see, am I getting the paint where I want it? Is it streaking? Am I covering it right? And I was painting the other day, and I showed somebody the picture. I collapsed a scaffolding, and I had a paint tray sitting on top of the scaffolding, and I was trying to adjust it down a little bit so I wasn't so close to the ceiling, and the whole thing just folded apart on me because I let go of the pins that were holding it together. So the scaffolding comes crashing to the ground. This paint pan flies through the air, and it lands, and paint splashed everywhere. And I sent pictures to my kids on the text on my phone, and I said, taking a moment of reflection. And I didn't get upset. I didn't get too worked up about it, and it took me about an hour to clean up my mess. But I'm not as particular about streaks on the paint as I was before I was trying to do all that with the scaffolding. And I've said, I'm going to do this from the pole on the ground, so I'm rolling, 14 feet over my head, it feels like. And then it's too far away. I can't see what I'm doing. I was too close before, now I'm too far away. I'm never happy. A paint perfectionist is never happy. You're never at the perfect angle, never at the perfect distance, unless you're doing that wall, that section that is 2.5 feet off the ground and 1.5 feet from the ceiling. I can roll that all day long. It's right here. I love doing that. Why can't we just let things go and accept that things aren't going to be perfect when it comes to painting, or a lot of other things we do? We look for perfection in our hearts. There are things that are worth attempting to perfect, like our faith. We look for things to perfect in how we support one another, how we come across to one another, how we can have empathy and feeling for each other, how we can support each other. These things are important, but so many things that distract us. Anything else on Philippians 4 you'd like to add, throw in?
Greg,
Yes, Chad.
if we 6 gives us a good understanding of what God expects us to do.
Mhm.
We know it's a constant battle that we have to fight every day against ourselves, against what God wants us to do. But it says we should, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. So we can pray to Him for help to get us through this stress and uncomfortable situations. When my first wife died, we were married 42 years. It was rough on me for a while till I got to thinking, she's in a better place now than what she would be if she was here, having to suffer all this pain from the cancer, and it had really done damage to her. So, you know, that situation, and then I talked to some of the men here, and we sat down and talked, and they affirmed too that, you know, she's in a better situation than what we are. So we should not get discouraged with God because He took our mate. And you've been through it, and a lot of these ladies here have all been through it. So we know, and Grace too, we know what the situation is. That we can easily get discouraged because we lost of our mate. But then we gotta think, our mates are in better shape than what we are if they're members of the church.
Yep. That is so true. When I may be seeking relief from the stress in life, we have to acknowledge that sometimes the stress may be working a deeper meaning because I need a change in my life. And God may be prepared to keep the pressure on until I bend to the pain and make a life change. It might take some time and more self-examination. There are going to be things in our life that are going to be stressful. And they're that way by God's hand, because He wants us to alter our life. He wants us to get wind of what message He's trying to send. Proverbs 17 and verse 3 says, "The refining pot is for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests hearts." I mentioned this verse earlier in the study. We understand that heat and pressure are parallels in terms of anxiety, stressors, that which causes pain, that for which we seek relief, and the Lord is testing hearts. It isn't always going to be to our advantage to find ways to sidestep the pain, as it is to face it and get a deeper understanding for ourselves as to why we may be incurring the feelings that we're incurring. And that's just going to take knowing yourself and being honest with yourself. I don't have any magic potion there either that says this is something that you should work to eliminate. Maybe you should deal with it. You make some pancakes and you do things that are going to help you deal with it while it works through its intended purpose. And God may be driving this. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, "No temptation has overtaken you, but such is common to man. And God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able, but with the temptation will provide a way of escape also, that you may be able to endure it." So this may play into the timing on these things, is that God can mount up the pressure in our lives as a way to test our hearts. And this may be about endurance as much as anything else, instead of avoidance or finding some coping mechanism that's unhealthy. Finding some way to bury the pain in some other way that's just going to be, not getting enough sleep, or turn into substances, or I should say medicinals, that are not prescribed by a doctor, or some that are sometimes. But it may be a timing thing, that the relief's not going to come. How do we recognize that? How do we see that in ourselves? How do we see that in others? I don't know. I don't always know that that apparent, but I think it's part of it, and it at least should be recognized when we are having those feelings of not dealing with life the way it is. There may be good measure, there may be good reasons why those things are turning out the way they are. And it might be time to step back, get away from the wall so you can see where the pain is and where the pain isn't, and do a little self-reflection. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think it's like with painting, sometimes you're too close to it. That's why we have Christians and we're here together to help one another. If you're too close to it, someone who's a Christian might say, hey, step back a little bit. You need some help. And I know pride hurts a lot of things. Some people are too proud and they won't ask for help. Some people, I'm all for self-guidance because people can get guided from afar just by with encouraging or things like that. Like, maybe it's not good to go there. Maybe you should come with me over here. You know, that type of thing. And phoning a friend, asking for help, it's not weakness. It's just getting through life, especially phoning the right friends, Christians, who love us. And I think those people, I mean, a kind word says a lot. So encouragement, and then too, if you haven't left the house in a week and you're still in your pajamas and someone knocks on the door and says, hey, get up, we're going for coffee. Come on. Say yes and go. Get out, dress up, get out of your pajamas. But I mean, there's things that we may not be able to see ourselves that others can. And that's why we're here to help each other see those choices.
And it takes caring about one another enough to do that too.
Definitely.
Yeah. I received a note this week, just thinking of you, praying for you. And I didn't even acknowledge the note, but I was so thankful for it. Just not being alone in your head and knowing that others care. Andrew?
I think what makes this so tough is that, you know, I think all anxiety and stress is a call to action of some kind, but it can be different because I agreed with Harriet's point that sometimes you need to set the thing aside and find something to divert your attention from it and move on. And sometimes it's extremely unhelpful to do that and not face the thing that is causing you the stress. Sometimes the thing that the anxiety is telling you to do is to actually face through the thing that you're anxious over. I'm thinking about, like, you got a deadline coming up. A lot of people are scared of having to give a speech, and you're anxious, and the only thing that cures it is getting through it, and then you're done, and you feel great when it's done because you got through it. And I listen to a lot of financial advice interviews, and people talk about being in crippling credit card debt, and the thing that makes me feel less stressed is going shopping. And it's like, well, it's great to do something to help avoid the stress, but this is not helping in this scenario. So when do you avoid and divert your attention, and when do you plunge through and face the thing head on? And I think at least that's where you need to be able to say to yourself, can I do something, or is this something out of my control? It goes back to that of, if I can't do anything about it, well, then I better turn my attention to something else. And if I can, then maybe I need to face through it a bit.
This is why I'd rather talk finances than mental wellness. It's a little more cut and dry. And I've sat down with several people over the years and said, now, I did it this spring with a young person. I said, no, budget is not about telling you what you can or cannot spend. A budget is just to help you find out where you're spending. And this person actually was interning in the State House this year, and she said, Senator Walker, you won't believe how much I spent on coffee last month. And I said, I bet you were shocked, weren't you? She said, yeah. I spent a lot of money on coffee, lattes or whatever. But that's a little more cut and dry. Samantha, you want to close this out?
Yes, I was going to go, appreciate what Harriet said about, you know, if you've been in the house for a week and someone comes and asks you to have coffee, go with them, because she's right, that is hard to do when you're in a certain state of discouragement and you want to be by yourself, which is probably the worst thing for you. I also wanted to add to that as well. I think a lot of this is just kind of being observant and keeping your eyes open, because sometimes a lot of times actually, people are not going to say when they're not doing well. And so being observant enough to notice when someone is not doing well and reaching out to them can be very encouraging as well.
Yeah, I was hoping that Samantha was going to tell me about her sixth sense the other day, because we kind of talked about, you know, the fact that you had this blind man and the impact that blindness had on that person. And Samantha was telling me, some people get a little wigged out, a little creeped out when I can pick up on things that others don't pick up on as easily. So she's honed her skills on the sound of your voice. I'll get these health reports from Samantha all the time. You sound tired tonight. Or, are you getting a cold? And are you running a fever? I mean, she's diagnosed me based upon the sound of my voice. And I can't do that for myself, let alone anyone else. But it's being attuned to one another, and just any difference. You're used to me being sort of a more half glass empty than a half glass full guy anyway. I've been that way my whole life, I think. So significant changes in behavior should be something we should take note of. And it can be going from a state of you know, malaise to a state of elation. Could also be a significant indicator that something is maybe a little different. Something ought to be just paid attention to make sure this person is dealing with life in a positive way. All right, we will pick up with another discussion on wellness. Trying to think if I should preview this or not. I'm just going to spring it on you, okay? And try to understand a state of mind and how we might respond and how we might help that person.